Jiu-Jitsu 2000 here today. I'm back and I have an interesting package for you guys. I want to unbox, I want to show you guys something. This is the APG multi-fuel stove. I picked this up on eBay for around 38 bucks. The camping multi-fuel stove. From the advertisement, it looks like a pretty solid little stove, so let's take a look and see what we can find here. I'm one that really likes stoves, so let's see what we got here. The first thing I see is this little owner's manual. This is a little bit about the stove here. This is model BRS-8. There's a schematic of what the stove is going to look like. Pretty excited about this. You know, it's not very often that you see a multi-fueled stove this cheap. And I'm not saying cheap as in a bad way, I'm saying it as inexpensive, okay? That's what I mean when I say cheap. So first thing I'm seeing here is this little pouch. It's got a nice little slide release buckle kind of thing on it. I always look at the stitching of the pouch to see if it's doubled back. This is real loose stitching, so this pouch probably not going to last very long. I'm not trying to knock the product, but you know, we did only pay $38. So this is a wind reflector for your stove. Wow, I like that. That's pretty cool. So technically I guess it goes like this because these things have to go down, and they're supposed to be like feet. Whoops. They're supposed to help support, you know, the wind reflector. So that goes around the stove. In the event of wind or something like that, you can kind of keep the heat in the stove. And I like that design way better than the hard aluminum foil that you get with a lot of the other stoves out there. I like this better. The bad part about having something like this, though, I think if those hinges get messed up, then you're going to have some problems. But from what I can tell, this looks like it's in fairly good quality. So I think that's a decent little wind reflector. So that comes in a nice little bag, which again, you know, not to repeat myself too much, I know I do that from time to time in my videos, but I just don't think that this stitching is going to hold up. It looks kind of weak and kind of wimpy, like they just put it together in a hurry, honestly. But we'll see. Okay, now I have another bag here. I'm going to open the bag. This bag, I believe, is the stove bag. There's two things in here. There is a plug for the fuel bottle. Got an O-ring on it. Fuel bottle cap. And there's also what appears to be a parts kit for the stove. Wow, it looks like that's a shaker needle. Kind of reminiscent of MSR. There's one of the jets. A couple O-rings. It looks like another pump cup possibly. A little tool. Pretty cool. I'm digging that. I think that's pretty cool. Same thing with the bag, though. The bag looks kind of cheap, but that's kind of cool, though. You get a maintenance kit, I guess you could say. So let's take a look at this fuel bottle. Now this stove, folks, came with a fuel bottle. Now most of the time when you get a stove, you have to buy the fuel bottle separate. And this is 32 ounces. This is 1 liter. So 1,000 milliliters. This is 1 liter, 32 ounces. It's a quite of a different shape bottle. It's short and fat. So that's kind of cool. Looks like it's a decent little bottle, honestly. I'm looking inside. It looks like a decent bottle. Good quality. I think the bottle is nice. I like that. So the next thing that we see here is what appears to be a fuel pump. It's got a nice little fuel filter on it. And I'm kind of crazy when it comes to pumps. I like taking everything apart and looking at everything inside, so let's do that with this one. This is an aluminum type construction. You know, this honestly reminds me of the Primus Eco Pump, I think they call it. Has a Lindell threaded valve here, which is pretty cool. Looks like brass. Looks like the Primus Eco Pump. Now here, so this is aluminum. This is like an aluminum plug, and we have a spring that goes on top of it. And you notice there's a hole in it so that you can see daylight through that. See that? You can see my finger through that. So that's a hollow aluminum plug, and then there's a spring. Now I have a brass detent with a O-ring on it. Now that O-ring is probably going to seal against that housing inside. So this is what the check valve looks like. Pretty simple. I think that would work. And one question that comes to mind right off the bat is, does the spare parts kit come with an additional spring for this check valve? I know there was O-rings in there, but was there a spring? No, there is no extra spring. So you better have a ballpoint pen handy so you can rob the spring out of that. So now let's take another look. I have an O-ring here. Let's see what this is about. Okay, I see what's going on now. So the check valve is one piece right here. So that spring and that little brass detent there goes against, see that? The spring loaded right there. I like that. I think that's pretty cool. I like this valve. Obviously you can see it threads right into the pump there on the bottom. Let's take a look at the pump cup. I always like looking at the pump cup. Okay, so there's a recoil spring on the pump cup, and there is the pump cup itself. Looks like there's a piece of hard plastic there. The pump cup looks decent, and it looks like there's a little nut right there. You can probably remove the nut and put the new pump cup on. So looking down inside the shaft of the pump, looks pretty nice. This pump looks decent. It really does. Truly looks decent. So all this stuff is aluminum. There's nothing that's like super heavy duty, but it's kind of got a light feeling to it. Like, I'm not saying cheap, but it's kind of got a little bit of a light feeling to it. This comes right off. So does, you know, and that happens with all of your major brands of stoves. I pulled that intentionally. It's not like that just happened. There's an O-ring right there that seals against the fuel bottle, so you could use a lot of different types of fuel bottles. So the O-ring seals right there. Pretty cool. So if you have an MSR bottle, or you're using any kind of bottle for that matter, it's a fuel bottle, you can get away with that. So that's pretty cool. So all in all, the pump looks like it's pretty decent. It's got a nice fuel line, big fuel filter. I think that's pretty cool. I think it's a decent looking little pump. So far we have a nice windshield, and I really like this fuel bottle. The fuel bottle feels really good. The fuel bottle feels solid. It feels you know, it's kind of bulky, but it's short. So it's not like one of these fuel bottles that's, you know, it's about the same height, but it's a lot fatter. So you get the fuel in a small, short package. I like that. I like the fact that the stove so far has came with a kit. Now I don't know if this is an additional jet for other fuels or if this is just a replacement jet. I don't know. And I also like the fact that this stove has what appears to be a shaker needle. You know, they're copying MSR, I think. So the last thing in this box is the stove itself. This thing's kind of heavy. Not in a bad way, but it's got a little bit of heft to it, a little bit of weight. So we can see here that the valve here is a Lindell style valve, so the stove should operate in canister feed mode. And I'm kind of thinking, because the stove has a big generator loop here, kind of thinking that it'll also work in liquid feed mode. And what makes me think that is the fact that this spins. Okay, this turns, so it'll give me the ability to do that. Has a nice O-ring inside, nice little rubber gasket here. It does have kind of a cheesy little bit of a feel to it. There's the valve, plenty of room to move, so I'm guessing that the flame control will be decent. Let's look at the fuel line itself. The fuel line itself reminds me of something that I would see like on an Optimus or maybe a Primus. It looks like a fairly decent fuel line. Good quality. Looks like there's a bolt here that holds the fuel line on. So you could probably replace the fuel line if you needed to. Now the bottom of the pot supports, they fold out here. They're kind of stiff, probably because this stove is brand spanking new from the factory. The pot supports, looks like it gives the stove a pretty stable feel. The stove feels solid, it really does. It doesn't feel cheesy or weak or anything like that. It feels solid, like it could be a decent stove. Now there's one thing that I want to talk about, and that's these little rubber feet. I don't truly think that those are necessary, but it is kind of a nice touch. I think they'll fall off in the field, but it is what it is. So you got the generator loop here that comes up, and this basically will heat up as the flame's coming out, and it'll vaporize this liquid gas into a vapor or a fuel or a air type gas. You can see down in the bottom, down in there, you can see the white priming wick, and you can also see the jet inside. Now let me hold this flame spreader. You hear that sound? That's a shaker needle inside the jet there. I like that feature. I think that's pretty cool. So I guess what I need to do now is fire this baby up and see what it's made of. How well does it work?